All right, so for the longest time, whenever I would see even any dollar or a penny leave my bank account, I would think of it as spending money. And I would kind of get a little bit butthurt because I felt like I wanted to hold every dollar that I earned and I worked hard for it to myself and basically keep it in my bank account. I hated seeing money leave my bank account, right? But it wasn't until recently where I kind of intentionally tried to deprogram my brain, because for the longest time I always thought, investing is still spending money, when in reality, investing is just finding a better way to reallocate your savings. Investing is technically still saving, in my opinion. And I'll explain that, because basically a regular savings account probably gets less than 1% in interest, whereas a high yield savings account, you could possibly get 3 to 4 to 5%, right? 3 to 5% with the high yield savings. But if you invest in something very safe, stable, and secure, like let's just say the S&P 500, I personally like VOO. If you invest in something like that, you can average, instead of 4 to 5% in a high yield savings, you can average 8 to 10%, which is a whole lot better. It's nearly 2 times the amount of interest you're going to be getting, or annual growth that you're going to be getting, which is insane. And there's not really any risk to it, especially if you're doing it long term. Short term, of course, S&P 500 could go up or down because it kind of follows the general economy of the US. But long term, historically, statistically, it has averaged 8 to 10% annual return, which is crazy. And I kind of started to realize that it's better to leave that money in the S&P 500 rather than leave it in your bank account. It's almost just as liquid because you can buy and sell whenever, and it's just going to give you a lot more growth long term. So I kind of started thinking, I basically started allocating any type of money that's additional income from my emergency fund. Basically any dollar I make that's over my emergency fund, which I've already had a 6-month emergency fund built up for a little bit now. So any extra money I started really allocating towards the S&P and started investing more aggressively, because I don't really have any future expenses coming up too soon. And if I did, I would just, I would just save that in a high yield savings because I'm going to spend it anyways. But because I don't, and because I'm already budgeting, living below my means, I feel like the best course of action for me is just to really invest more aggressively now into the S&P 500. I'm already contributing 8% of every paycheck towards retirement. I already maxed out my Roth IRA for the year. So my next step really is just to put a bunch of money, put a lot of my paychecks towards my brokerage account, which is with Fidelity, and just spam the S&P 500, because that's going to give me a way greater return than anything in my high yield savings account. And one of my buddies kind of brought the point when I was explaining this to him the other day, which kind of made me think a little bit. But he was saying, hey, don't you want to get a house in the future? And I'm 22 right now. I don't really plan on getting a house until either like my late 20s or my early 30s. So like I just, my goal is to have a house by 30, right? So it's a good 8 years. And I was thinking, if I just save money in my high yield savings account for 8 years, and it just gives me 4% interest per year or whatever, compared to if I just put that same amount of money into the S&P 500, reinvested all the dividends, that, let's just say over that period of 8 years, it grew 10% during that time, which is pretty realistic for the S&P. Even if I had to sell some stock to use as a down payment for my house, even after the tax hit, I would have to pay long-term capital gains tax because I've held for over a year. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the long-term capital gains tax is only 20-25%, which may seem like a lot, but compared to regular income from a job, it's nothing. And I feel like within those 8 years overall, if you do the math, your money's going to grow a lot bigger than 20%, right? So I feel like even though that you have to pay long-term capital gains tax, the growth that you get from the S&P 500 is still better, and it's still liquid enough that you can almost use it as a kind of savings account. Now, of course, you can use it as a long-term savings account, but you shouldn't use it as a short-term savings account, because then you pay short-term capital gains taxes. You don't want to be buying and selling a bunch in that brokerage account. You kind of want to just keep it static for the most part and just contribute and really never sell. But what I'm saying is, further down the line, in around 10 years, if there's a big future expense, you can always sell some stock to cover that, pay the long-term capital gains tax, and you would still be better off doing that method compared to just saving in a high yield savings account that's only going to grow 3.5% a year. You know what I mean? And it's almost just as liquid because you can buy and sell it at any time, the same way that you can transfer money out of your high yield savings account at any time. So honestly, that's my plan. And that kind of gave me a lot of reassurance that what I was doing was a good idea, because I was kind of tripped up about the liquidity of it, I guess. Like, I was like, it's so easy to access the money if I just have it in a high yield savings account. Whereas with a brokerage, there's all these additional steps to kind of get my money out, which is somewhat true. Like, of course, you have to, go in there and manually sell stock, which doesn't take any work, but it's just an extra step, which is almost kind of good because it'll make you less likely to take out money that you don't need. But in my situation, I'm very blessed and thankful that I don't have to pay any rent. I'm able to live off $500, $600 a month to cover all my expenses, which is amazing. And as a result, I'm able to save and invest a lot of money every single month. I just maxed out my Roth IRA. And now the next logical step is just to contribute a lot of money towards my, Fidelity account and just put more money into the S&P. And like I said, my plan is if I do end up buying a house in 30 years, because of the potential appreciation, it'll be still a better idea to just sell some stock, use that for a down payment, or at least a little bit just to kind of help. I'll still have money in my high yield savings account. But right now my plan is in my high yield savings account, I'm only going to have my 6-month emergency fund. And my other priority is, since I already maxed out my Roth IRA for this year, I'm going to start saving up $7,000 so that in January of 2026, literally the first day of the next year, the first day of 2026, I'm planning on just putting that whole $7,000 into the Roth IRA, maxing it out right away. That way I have the longest time in the market and I don't have to worry about doing monthly payments. So I don't know about you guys. I would rather pay a big chunk at one time than do everything monthly. I kind of like, it's just my personal opinion and my personal approach too, is that if you can afford to do it all at one time, it's better, because I personally don't like seeing a bunch of, money coming out of my bank account every single month. I'd rather just see a one-time hit and then kind of be able to pocket that money every month. But yeah, guys, that's kind of my plan going forward. I would definitely want to hit that 7,000 by the end of this year. That way I can just not have to worry about maxing out my Roth. I can just do